This video is brought to you by the Paladin Learn History app. Stand on any street corner in Rome today, maybe near the traffic-choked intersection of the Piazza Venezia, and you'll hear the modern world at its most frantic. You've got the high-pitched scream of Vespers, the hiss of espresso machines, and a dozen languages swirling around you. It is the ultimate museum. But if you could peel back the cobblestones and dig through the 10 meters of clotted debris beneath your feet, you wouldn't just find dirt. You find a vertical graveyard of power, a mountain of marble, blood, ash, and broken pottery. Rome isn't just a city, it's a geological record of human ego. For nearly 3,000 years, this patch of volcanic earth has been the epicenter of Western civilization, and it has spent that entire time dying and being reborn in a cycle that refuses to end. We've had to rely on cracked statues and faded mosaics to guess what the eternal city actually felt like at its height. But now, using AI technology trained on the actual architectural grit and the hidden blueprints of the past, we can take those original excavations and breathe life into them. We aren't just looking at the white marble ruins, we are stepping into the smoke, the grime, and the absolute crushing scale of a city that once governed the sun itself. This is part 1, the rise. To understand Rome, you have to forget the white marble. You have to start with the mud. In the 8th century before our era, the Palatine Hill wasn't a palace, it was a collection of thatched roof huts made of mud and straw. If you were standing there at dawn, you'd smell sheep and wood smoke. It was a place for outcasts and fugitives, a tiny settlement huddled on a hill overlooking a swampy malarial bend in the Tiber River. But these early Romans had a secret weapon. They were obsessed with engineering. They realized that if they wanted to grow, they had to conquer the water. They built the Cloaca Maxima, the Great Sewer. We think of Romulus as the founder, but the true founder of Rome was this vaulted stone tunnel.
By draining the swampy valley between the hills, they created the Forum. It changed the geography of the human mind. Suddenly, the isolated tribes on the hills had a neutral ground where they could meet, trade, and eventually govern. They turned a landscape of isolation into a landscape of connection. By the time the Republic is born, that sheep town has become an iron-fisted state. The Romans discovered another secret. They didn't just conquer people, they absorbed them. They took the gods of the Greeks, the masonry of the Etruscans, and the weapons of the Gauls, and they made them Roman. But it's the arrival of wealth that truly triggers the explosion. After the total destruction of Carthage, the gold of the world starts flowing into the Tiber. By the 1st century BC, the city is buckling under its own weight. This is the era of Julius Caesar, a city of civil wars and street brawls. And then comes the man who changed the visual DNA of history, Augustus. He famously boasted that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. But what does that actually mean for the person on the street? It means a total psychological transformation. Imagine waking up in a city that is suddenly glowing. Augustus and his right-hand man, Agrippa, didn't just build temples, they built a brand. They used Carrara marble hauled from the mountains of Tuscany to face every major building. But here is the meat of the city that people forget. Rome was a city of high-rises. While the emperors lived in sprawling palaces on the Palatine, 90% of Romans lived in insulae. These were 6-story apartment blocks made of timber and cheap brick. They were death traps. They were perpetually catching fire or simply collapsing because landlords ignored building codes. If you lived on the 4th floor, you had no running water and no kitchen. If you wanted to eat, you went to a thermopolium, an ancient fast food counter. You'd see thousands of people standing in the street eating lentil stew and grilled sausages because they were too afraid to light a fire in their wooden rooms. The city was a 24-hour machine of noise. Because of the Lex Iulia, heavy wagons were banned from the streets during the day to prevent gridlock. So, as soon as the sun went down, the city started to shake. You'd lie in your bed listening to iron wheels grinding on stone pavers, delivering the grain of Egypt and the wine of Gaul. The smell was an intense cocktail, expensive incense from the temples mixing with the stench of open gutters and the garum factories of fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything. And then there is the Colosseum. It's the ultimate icon, but look at the mechanics. It's finished in the 80th year of our era, a 50,000-seat killing machine. It isn't just about gladiators, it's about the spectacle of the state. It had a massive retractable roof called the Velarium, operated by a specialized unit of sailors from the Imperial Navy who climbed the rigging like they were on a ship. Beneath the floor was a two-story labyrinth of elevators and trapdoors. You'd see a lion suddenly appear in the middle of the arena like magic. It was the world's first high-tech theater of death. Just a mile away sits the Pantheon, the engineering masterpiece of Emperor Hadrian. You walk inside and for the first time in your life, you feel the weight of empty space. The concrete dome is 43 meters wide with no internal supports. The Romans invented a secret source for their concrete, pozzolana. It was a volcanic ash that created a chemical reaction, allowing the concrete to set even underwater and support massive weights. The hole in the roof, the oculus, lets in a single beam of light that moves across the marble floor like a giant sundial. It was the moment the Romans proved they had conquered the air itself. By the 2nd century, Rome is the center of a world that stretches from Scotland to the Sahara. You see people of every color and every language in the Forum. It is the most diverse city on earth. But you also see the grime. You see the philoniki, the laundromats where people are treading on clothes in vats of human urine, which the state collected and taxed because the ammonia was a natural bleach. It was a city that was brilliant and disgusting, sophisticated and brutal, all at the same time. But by the year 271 AD, the Golden Age is over. The borders are leaking. For the first time in centuries, the Romans are afraid. Emperor Aurelian builds a new wall, the Aurelian Walls. 19 kilometers of defensive stone. It is a massive, expensive admission. The world is no longer safe. Rome is no longer an empire that expands, it is a city that is hiding. The marble is still there, the games are still happening, but the lights are starting to flicker. We've reached the peak. The city of 1.2 million people is standing at the edge of a cliff. In part 2, we are going to see the aqueducts stop, the marble melt, and the sheep return to the Forum. But for now, in the year 300 AD, Rome is still the sun, and everything else is just a shadow. By the year 271 AD, the Roman swagger had turned into a cold, hard sweat. For centuries, Rome didn't need a wall because the borders were thousands of miles away, but the world had changed. You wake up and see the Aurelian Walls going up 19 kilometers of brick-faced concrete, 6 meters high. This wasn't a monument, it was an admission of fear. The city was no longer the hunter, it was the prey. And then, the ultimate betrayal. Emperor Constantine packs the archives, the gold and the talent, and moves the capital to Byzantium. Rome is left like a grand mansion whose owner has moved out, leaving only the servants to wonder when the lights will go out. The lights start flickering in 410 AD. At midnight, the Salarian Gate is opened from the inside, and Alaric's Goths flood the streets. For 3 days, the Eternal City is a buffet. They aren't just taking gold, they are taking the psychological certainty of the Roman world. You'd see aristocrats who once owned thousands of slaves now begging for a piece of bread in the shadow of their own looted villas. But even the sack of 410 was just a bruise. The true death of the ancient city was a slow, agonizing biological failure. The Gothic wars of the 530s are the real meat of the collapse. The Goths do the one thing that a million-man city cannot survive. They cut the aqueducts. Imagine the silence when the water stops. The massive public baths, which were the central nervous system of Roman social life, turn into dry, echoing stone caves. The hypercoursed heating systems fail. The sewage stops moving. Suddenly, the high-rise insulae on the hills are uninhabitable death traps. You see a population of nearly 1 million people evaporate in a matter of decades. People flee the hills because you can't carry water up to the Palatine or the Aventine in buckets. They huddle in the low-lying, swampy ground by the Tiber, the abitato digging primitive wells in the mud. By the year 600, the Queen of Cities has dwindled to just 30,000 people living like squatters in a stone forest. This is the era of the Campo Vaccino, the cow pasture. The Roman Forum, the place where Caesar and Cicero spoke, is buried under 3 meters of silt and manure. You'd see a shepherd leaning his staff against the arch of Septimius Severus, watching sheep graze over the buried Senate house. The grand monuments aren't ruins yet, they are quarries. This is a visceral part of the history people ignore. The Calcarari, these were the marble burners. You would walk past the temple of Castor and Pollux and see a massive smoking kiln built right against the columns. They were taking the masterpieces of Phidias and the marble facing of the theatres and melting them down into white powder just to make lime for mortar. The city was cannibalizing its own corpse. But the papacy realized that if they couldn't rule through the sword, they could rule through the spirit. They turned the ancient buildings into churches. The Pantheon survived only because it was converted into a church in 609 AD, otherwise it would have been melted down for its bronze. By the year 1000, Rome is a bizarre, fortified mosaic. You have the noble families, the Orsini, the Colonna, the Frangipani turning the ancient monuments into private fortresses. The Colosseum becomes a castle. The Mausoleum of Hadrian becomes the Castel Sant'Angelo, a bunker for the popes linked to the Vatican by a secret elevated stone passage. The Renaissance of the 1500s is a psychedelic rebirth, but it was brutal. The popes are rich again, and they want to outbuild the Caesars. But to build the new saint, Peter's, they treat the ancient city like a giant hardware store. They strip the bronze from the Pantheon's porch to cast cannons and altars. They tear down the old Basilica of Constantine to make way for the dome. You see Michelangelo standing on a scaffold, his face covered in plaster dust, looking down at a city that is a massive construction site. They are digging up the ground and finding the masterpieces, the Laocoön and the Belvedere torso, and these aren't just art to them, they are a challenge. Raphael and Bramante aren't just painting, they are trying to reconstruct the very scale of the ancient world. The Baroque era, in the 1600s, turns the city into a stage. This is the era of Bernini. He understands that Rome is a city of water. He repairs the ancient Roman aqueducts, the Aqua Felici and the Aqua Paula, and brings the water back to the hills. Suddenly, the fountains erupt. The Trevi, the four rivers, the Triton. The city is a masterpiece of theatrical stone and moving water. But beneath the fountains, the layers remain. When Bernini builds a palace, his workers hit the mosaic floors of a villa from the time of Nero. The city is a palimpsest. Every new sentence is written over a half-erased ancient one. The 1800s bring the industrial hammer. In 1870, Rome is finally taken from the popes and made the capital of a unified Italy. The new government is obsessed with Third Rome. They want to prove they are the heirs to the ancient glory. So they build the Vittoriano, the massive, blindingly white monument to Victor Emmanuel II. It is an enormous, expensive, and controversial statement in stone that required tearing down entire medieval neighborhoods. They finally build the high stone embankments, the Lungotiver, to stop the floods that have drowned the city every winter for 2,500 years. They are finally taming the Tiber, but at the cost of the picturesque riverfront that had existed since the Middle Ages. Then comes the 1930s. And the radical surgery of Mussolini. He is a man obsessed with the Roman idea. He views the medieval and Renaissance layers as parasites on the ancient core. He orders the demolition of the crowded slums that had grown up around the Colosseum and the Forum. He wants to create the Via dei Fori Imperiali, a massive cold parade ground where he can march his troops past the ruins of the empire. He wants to look out his window at the Palazzo Venezia and see the past as a mirror for his own power. But Rome resists. You can't clear a city this deep. The cleared zones just expose more layers, more complexity, more ghosts. Today, you stand at a bus stop next to the Lago di Torre Argentina, and you look down into a pit where Julius Caesar was stabbed, and there are stray cats sleeping on the altars. You look up and see a Renaissance palace, and behind it, a glass office block. Rome is the ultimate survivor because it is a city of and, not or. It is ancient and medieval and modern. It has survived the Gauls, the Goths, the Black Death, the Great Fire, and the Allied bombs of 1943. Each time it falls, it provides the stone for its own resurrection. The aqueducts were cut, the walls were breached, the marble was melted, and yet the city is still here. That constant adaptation, the refusal to stay dead, is why Rome is the blueprint of the human soul. It's the proof that even when the infrastructure fails and the gold is stolen, the idea of the city is indestructible. We've evolved the technology, we have the internet and the subways, but the operating system of the city is still Roman. They wrote the code. We've just been running updates on it for 2,500 years.